Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you lost? Not because you were wrong, but because you couldn't find the words. Not because they were smarter, but because they were louder. It's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world, having the truth, but not the tools to deliver it. And in that silence afterward, you carry the weight of everything you should have said. But what if, instead of reacting with emotion, you could respond with such calm precision that the other person simply stopped talking, not out of defeat, but because they knew they couldn't shake you? In a world where people confuse noise with strength and aggression with authority, there's a quiet power in holding your ground with poise. The Stoics knew this well. They believed that true power isn't about domination, it's about self-mastery. And today I want to show you exactly how to flip that script, how to speak in a way that earns respect without raising your voice, how to stand tall, not by shouting louder, but by saying less and meaning more. If you're someone who values inner peace over petty drama, who's tired of being talked over, pushed around, or underestimated, then this video is for you. These 5 responses aren't about silencing others for the sake of ego. They're about protecting your dignity, reclaiming your power, and walking away from every conversation with your head high and your heart steady. If you're on a journey to become more grounded, more mindful, and more unshakably you, please subscribe for the version of yourself that's done being reactive and ready to respond with strength. 1. I don't need to raise my voice to be right. Most people think arguments are won by who gets louder first. They believe that if they speak with more volume, more intensity, and more force, they'll win the room. It's a belief drilled into us from childhood. If you don't shout, you won't be heard. If you don't defend yourself aggressively, you'll be seen as weak. But here's the truth nobody talks about. The loudest person in the room is usually the least in control. And control over your mind, your emotions, your presence. That's where real power lives. The moment someone raises their voice to dominate a conversation, they reveal something very clearly. They've already lost the calm, and they're trying to replace it with noise. Now think about the last time you were in a heated conversation. Maybe it was with someone close to you, someone who knows how to press your buttons. Or maybe it was at work, when someone questioned your competence or tried to embarrass you in front of others. What did you feel? That tightening in your chest, the heat rising in your face, the adrenaline flooding in. That ancient instinct to push back, to fight, to protect your pride. It's normal, it's human. But it's also what makes us reactive instead of wise. It's what turns conversations into battlegrounds and leaves both sides feeling like they lost something. There's a quiet kind of power that most people never tap into. A power that doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't bark. It doesn't demand. It simply exists. And when it's felt, everything else fades into the background. That power shows up in the form of composure. And that composure often looks like this one sentence: I don't need to raise my voice to be right. It's deceptively simple, but when spoken in a moment of tension, it shifts the entire dynamic. Because it doesn't attack the person, it dismantles the energy. It tells them, you can throw all the fire you want, but it won't pull me out of my peace. There's something about calm that disorients those who are used to chaos. Someone comes at you expecting a reaction, expecting heat, emotion, retaliation, and what they get is stillness. That stillness unnerves them, because it reminds them of what they're lacking. It puts a mirror in front of their own emotional chaos. It exposes the noise, and in that exposure, they realize they've lost their grip on the moment. That's the real reason this phrase silences people. It doesn't overpower them. It reminds them they're out of control. Epictetus taught that any person capable of angering you becomes your master. What he meant was simple. If they can provoke you, they own you. They control the strings of your nervous system. They pull and you react. But what happens when you don't react? What happens when you let the provocation pass through you, untouched, unclaimed? You gain the upper hand, not over them, but over yourself. That's the power we're talking about here. The power to stand in fire and not become it. And it's not about being emotionless. Let's be clear, Stoicism isn't the absence of feeling. It's the mastery of response. You feel the anger, you feel the urge to yell, to defend, to win, but you don't let those feelings drive your behavior. You let them pass like a storm. You sit beneath them, watching, and when they fade, what's left is clarity. That's what Stoics trained for, the ability to pause, reflect, and respond deliberately, not impulsively. That's what this phrase embodies. It's not just a statement, it's a demonstration of inner strength. Now let's put it into a real-world scenario. Picture yourself at a family gathering. Everyone's having a good time, but then someone brings up a topic you've disagreed on before, something that cuts deep. They raise their voice, maybe even throw a passive-aggressive jab your way. All eyes turn to you. Everyone expects a scene, but you just breathe, stay grounded and say, "I don't need to raise my voice to be right." You don't flinch, you don't waver, you speak clearly, calmly. And in that moment, you take the oxygen out of the fire. You don't win by crushing the other person. You win by refusing to burn. When someone raises their voice, what they're often expressing is their own insecurity, their own fear of not being heard, their own unresolved need to feel in control. And when you understand that, it becomes easier to respond with compassion, not combat. You stop taking it personally. You stop needing to dominate. You see them clearly. And more importantly, you see yourself clearly too. This kind of communication, firm but calm, is magnetic. People trust it. They listen differently. They lean in. Because in a world that's constantly yelling, the quiet voice becomes the most powerful one. It signals confidence, not passivity. It tells people that you don't just believe in what you're saying, you believe in yourself enough not to need external validation. That belief shows. It radiates from your body language, your tone, your timing. And that's what others remember, not the details of the argument, but the way you carried yourself inside it. And if you're wondering whether people will take you seriously if you stay calm, just look at the people who lead with true presence. They aren't flailing around trying to be heard. They aren't drowning others out to prove their point. They speak and the room quiets, not because they demanded it, but because people wanted to hear them. That's what composure does. It earns respect silently. Seneca said, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." That means the real danger in conflict isn't the other person, it's what we become in response to them. When you raise your voice in rage, you lose your center. You abandon your values. You often say things you didn't mean just to land a punch, and afterward, you're the one who feels the regret, the shame, the self-betrayal. So what are we really gaining when we yell to be heard? This isn't just about communication. It's about identity. The kind of person you want to be in moments of pressure. Anyone can stay calm when things are going well. But who are you when the tension rises? When someone's trying to humiliate you? When your ideas are dismissed? That's where character is revealed. And when you can hold your center and speak calmly, especially when your instincts scream otherwise, you send a powerful message to everyone watching, including yourself. In a way, every conflict is a spiritual test. Not in the religious sense, but in the sense of being tested against your higher self. You're not being asked to prove the other person wrong. You're being asked to prove to yourself that you've grown, that you've matured, that you've built something inside that doesn't break at the first sign of pressure. And when you pass that test, The confidence that grows from it can't be taken by anyone else because you earned it through discipline. And let's talk about the ripple effect. When you start communicating this way, people notice. You begin to influence the atmosphere around you. Others feel it. They adjust their tone. They check their words. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence calls for it. You're not participating in emotional chaos, and that refusal creates a space of stability. It gives others permission to rise to your level, or reveals those who aren't ready to meet you there. Over time, you become known as someone who can be trusted in tense situations, someone who doesn't escalate, but grounds, someone who listens deeply, speaks clearly, and leads without needing to dominate. And the more you lean into that identity, the less reactive you become. The more you can hold power without having to flex it. And that kind of presence, that's rare. That's what sets people apart in relationships, in leadership, in life. Plato once noted that wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. When you stop shouting, you begin speaking with purpose. Every word lands with weight. Every pause carries meaning. You don't waste energy proving your value, you embody it. And in that embodiment, people listen, not out of fear, but out of respect. Not because you made them, but because your energy spoke first. So the next time someone tries to raise the volume on you, remember this. You don't need to match noise with noise. You don't need to earn your place by out-talking anyone. Your truth doesn't get stronger just because you shout it. It gets clearer when you say it with certainty, when you own it without needing anyone's permission. 2. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. There's a moment we've all experienced where someone speaks to you not with disagreement, but with disdain. They lace their words with sarcasm. They don't argue, they mock. They don't listen, they belittle. And what cuts deeper than the content of what they say is the tone. It's sharp, dismissive, almost theatrical. They want to provoke, to unsettle, to make you feel small. And it works, at least for a moment. Because your mind starts racing with comebacks. Your heart beats faster. You rehearse imaginary arguments in your head, trying to reclaim the power they just tried to take from you. But in all that chaos, in all that mental noise, there's one truth quietly waiting to be recognized. The way someone speaks to you says more about them than it does about you. This truth isn't just a clever observation. It's a complete reframing of power. When someone lashes out or speaks down, it's easy to think they're revealing something about you, that maybe you're not being clear enough, maybe you are wrong, maybe you deserve that tone, but that's rarely the case, because how a person communicates in moments of tension, conflict, or discomfort is a mirror, one that reflects their upbringing, their worldview, their emotional maturity, and most of all, their self-control. And when someone chooses to speak to you with disrespect, it is almost always a confession of their own inner disorder. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In that same spirit, everything someone reveals through their words, especially their tone, offers a peek into who they really are. It tells you what they've suppressed. It tells you how they view people who don't agree with them. It tells you how threatened they are when their ideas are challenged. Because confident people don't attack others for thinking differently. Secure people don't need to humiliate to feel valid. They know who they are, so they allow others the same dignity. Now think about those moments when someone crossed a line, not with facts, but with the way they said them. Maybe they rolled their eyes mid-conversation, smirked while you were speaking, or used that passive-aggressive tone that feels more like a slap than a sentence. And maybe, in that moment, you felt small. You felt the urge to strike back, to match their sarcasm, to jab where it hurts, to say something you knew would leave a mark. But deep down, you also knew that if you responded like them, you'd become like them, and that would cost you your peace, your values, and your control. That's why this phrase, "the way you speak says more about you than it does about me," is so powerful. It interrupts the cycle. It doesn't return fire. It doesn't fuel the drama. It simply holds up a mirror, and not just any mirror, an honest one they can't argue with, because it reflects back their tone, their energy, their choice of words. You're not shaming them. You're not scolding them. You're just showing them something they didn't want to see, themselves, unfiltered. What makes this so effective is that it doesn't come from a place of emotional reactivity. It's not a line you throw out to win. It's a boundary you place to protect yourself and to invite the other person to self-reflect. And whether or not they admit it, they will feel it. They may roll their eyes again, they may scoff, but inside, something lands. Because unlike an insult, this phrase doesn't trigger defensiveness, it activates awareness. And for people who've never been forced to look at their own patterns, that awareness is deeply uncomfortable. We live in a world where people often feel justified in speaking with cruelty as long as they believe they're right. But being right never justifies being rude. You can disagree with someone without dehumanizing them. You can challenge an idea without attacking the person behind it. That's emotional maturity. That's ethical strength. But unfortunately, many people skip that. They use tone as a weapon and then hide behind logic like a shield. And if you're not careful, you'll start doing the same. But you don't have to. You don't have to step into that arena. You can observe their tone and recognize it for what it is, an expression of who they are, not a statement about who you are. And when you say, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me," you reclaim your power without trying to take theirs. You assert your boundaries without raising your voice. You walk away with your self-respect untouched. And that's a victory far greater than winning an argument. There's a quiet dignity in refusing to be dragged into someone else's emotional chaos, in watching their words swirl like a storm while you remain still, in not responding to disrespect with more disrespect, but instead with clarity. Because clarity is what shuts people down, not clever insults. When you're clear about who you are, what you value, and what you will and won't tolerate, people either step up or step back. And both outcomes are useful. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. What someone says to you is outside your control. But how you interpret it, how you respond, how you carry yourself in that moment, that's yours, fully, entirely. And that's where the focus should be, not on proving them wrong, not on defending your ego, but on staying true to yourself, even when everything in the moment is begging you to stoop lower." So how do you get there? How do you stay composed when someone's clearly pushing your buttons? You remind yourself of this. Disrespect is often a cry for control, a sign that the person across from you feels threatened, and instead of owning their fear, they try to throw it at you. But fear disguised as aggression is still fear. And when you can see that, their behavior stops being personal. It becomes predictable. And predictable things don't need to be fought, they just need to be understood. Now, this doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. Let's be clear, this phrase isn't permission to let people walk all over you. It's not passivity, it's power. Power to disengage without drama. Power to defend yourself without becoming like the person who attacked you. You can draw lines, you can walk away, but you do it with intention, not impulse. That's the difference. And here's the truth. When you start using this phrase, when you start anchoring yourself in this kind of presence, some people will push back even harder, because you're not playing the game. You're not reacting like they expected. You're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. and that unnerves them, because it makes them look inward. It forces them to notice the echo of their own voice, and that echo often reveals more than they're ready to hear. Seneca said, "To be even-minded is the greatest virtue." Even-minded, not emotionally flat, not cold, but stable, centered, calm in the face of someone else's chaos. That's what you embody when you use this phrase. You show that your self-worth isn't up for negotiation, that your energy isn't available for every argument, that you won't let someone else's emotional instability set the temperature of your mind. Over time, people will begin to associate you with steadiness. They'll realize that you don't tolerate certain tones, that if they want to have a conversation with you, they'll have to rise to your level, not drag you to theirs. And slowly, the way people speak to you will begin to change, because energy doesn't lie. And when you carry the energy of calm confidence, it creates a kind of silent accountability for everyone you interact with. Socrates once taught that the greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be. That applies here more than ever. We all want to be seen as wise, grounded, composed. But are we actually practicing that when things get hard, when someone disrespects us, when we're tempted to fire back? Using this phrase is more than a communication strategy. It's a way of aligning your behavior with your values. It's a daily test of your emotional integrity. And look, this isn't always easy. There will be days when your patience wears thin, when someone's tone cuts deeper than you expected, when you feel the heat rising in your chest and the words rushing to your tongue. That's okay. You're human. Growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. And in that awareness, you give yourself the chance to pause, to breathe, to choose your response. And sometimes that choice looks like stepping back. Other times it looks like saying calmly, "The way you're speaking right now says more about you than it does about me." 3. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully. There's a particular kind of argument that doesn't feel like an argument. It feels like a trap. You start with the intention to solve something, to bring clarity, maybe even peace. But very quickly, the energy shifts. Voices rise, interruptions pile on top of each other. The other person stops listening, not because they disagree, but because they don't care to understand. They don't want resolution. They want control. And at some point, you realize, this isn't a conversation anymore. It's an emotional battleground. And in those moments when your mind feels like it's being pulled in every direction, there's one sentence that brings everything back into focus. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully. There's a strange pressure we put on ourselves to keep talking when things get heated. Like silence is surrender, like walking away means you lost. But that's not true. Sometimes continuing a conversation is the most damaging thing you can do. Because words spoken in disrespect are weapons disguised as dialogue. And every time you stay in that dynamic, hoping they'll suddenly become gentle or reasonable, you betray your own sense of peace. You start twisting your words to be heard, defending your tone more than your point, and wondering if maybe you're the one overreacting. But if you have to raise your voice to feel heard, or lower your standards to keep someone comfortable, it's already gone too far. There's something incredibly powerful about drawing a boundary, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with grace. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully isn't a door slammed in someone's face. It's a door you gently close until they learn how to knock like a decent human being. You're not ending the conversation forever. You're just saying, "Not like this." And that small act of self-respect can ripple through every relationship you have. Because once people learn that you won't stay in the room when respect leaves, they start paying attention to how they speak to you. And the ones who don't, they get quieter. Not because you silenced them, but because they lost access to your energy. That's what most people don't realize. You don't owe anyone a conversation they're not ready to have with maturity. You're not obligated to explain yourself to someone who refuses to listen. And you certainly don't have to sit in front of someone who's trying to win an argument by tearing down your dignity. The moment you say this phrase, you're not just protecting your mental space, you're protecting your emotional clarity. You're saying, I refuse to discuss truth in an environment of disrespect, and it doesn't matter who it is, partner, parent, boss, friend. If they're more interested in overpowering you than understanding you, you have every right to walk away, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to protect your boundaries. Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." And the same goes for communication. Some people think raising their voice is normal. Some people think sarcasm is harmless. Some people genuinely don't know what respect looks like in a discussion because they've never seen it modeled. And while it's not your job to rewire their entire emotional toolkit, it is your job to protect your space from what doesn't feel right. Because over time, if you keep tolerating chaos, you start internalizing it. You start thinking that all communication must come with conflict, that it's normal to feel anxious before every conversation, that being constantly interrupted or dismissed is just part of being close to someone. But it's not. It never was. Healthy communication feels safe, even in disagreement. It leaves room for pause. It respects timing. It invites curiosity. It doesn't bulldoze you. It doesn't make you feel like your voice is a threat. And if you've gone too long without that kind of space, this phrase might feel foreign to say. It might feel bold, even risky, but saying it is a statement of worth. You're telling the world that you don't just want better conversations, you expect them, that you're not available for relationships that don't include basic decency. And once you say it a few times, you'll wonder why you ever accepted less. There's a myth that strong people never walk away. That strength is measured by your ability to keep debating, keep explaining, keep enduring. But the truth is, real strength often looks like stepping back, not because you're weak, but because you understand that respect is the foundation of any meaningful dialogue. Without it, words are just noise. That pause you take when you say, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully," that's not a retreat. It's a reset. You're telling both yourself and the other person, we're not doing this halfway. We're not going to pretend this is okay. When we come back to this, we're doing it better. And here's the unexpected gift inside that pause. Sometimes it gives the other person just enough space to reflect, to feel the weight of their tone, to realize they were speaking from fear, ego, insecurity. Not always, but often, because silence is a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see in it. But the right people, the people who value connection more than control, they'll come back differently, softer, clearer, more ready to listen, more willing to meet you where you are. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that applies deeply here. You can't control someone's tone, their triggers, their need to dominate a conversation, but you can control what you choose to participate in. You can control whether you stay in a room where you're being talked at, not spoken with. You can decide that your voice will not be part of conversations where voices are only used to shout. That's not avoidance. That's emotional maturity. And this isn't just about big fights or dramatic fallouts. This applies to the quiet, daily disrespects too. The subtle digs, the interruptions that always seem accidental, the dismissive looks, the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive comments wrapped in fake concern. These little things stack up. They chip away at your confidence, your clarity, your comfort. And before you know it, you're shrinking in conversations you once felt confident in. You're hesitating before speaking. You're questioning whether your reaction is valid. But you don't have to live like that. You can reclaim your sense of authority, not over others, but over your space. And the first step is knowing when to pause a conversation that's slipping into chaos. It's giving yourself the gift of grace. It's saying, I'll come back to this, but not like this. And even if they don't understand, even if they try to guilt you for stepping away, you'll know deep down that you didn't abandon the conversation. You saved it. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." And that's exactly what this phrase does. It brings the power back to you. It pulls you out of emotional reactivity and places you in the seat of conscious choice. It reminds you that presence is a privilege, not a punishment, that you don't have to stand there and absorb someone else's storm to prove your point. You are not the cleanup crew for other people's emotional messes. You are not the outlet for their frustration, and you are not responsible for how they feel about your boundaries. So if someone gets angry when you say, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully," that tells you everything. Because if your desire for respect offends them, they were never trying to communicate, they were trying to control, and you don't need to entertain that energy, no matter who it comes from. Now, let's imagine how this plays out in real life. Picture yourself in an argument. The other person is interrupting, they're raising their voice, they're throwing around accusations you know aren't fair. You feel your stomach tighten, your hands clench, but instead of getting louder, you breathe. You ground yourself. You look at them and say, "Let's talk when we can do it respectfully." That's it. No yelling, no explaining, just clarity. And then silence. Maybe they follow you. Maybe they protest. Maybe they call you dramatic. But none of that matters, because you just set a standard. And whether they admit it or not, they now know exactly where your line is. The best part? You don't need to justify it. You don't need to convince them that their tone was off. You don't need a long explanation. You simply step away. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. It's not about creating conflict. It's about protecting connection, because conversations rooted in respect are the only ones worth having. Aristotle once said, "Anybody can become angry, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy." The same could be said for communication. Anyone can talk, but to communicate with clarity, kindness, and firm boundaries, that requires strength, that requires practice, that requires knowing your value. 4. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. There comes a point in almost every heated conversation where something shifts. You begin with the hope of clarity, maybe even resolution, but then, somewhere between the raised eyebrows and the repeated interruptions, you feel it. That invisible line has been crossed. The conversation has stopped being productive. It's no longer about understanding or compromise. It's about control, winning, noise. And while every part of your nervous system may be telling you to stay in it, to keep talking, keep explaining, keep defending, there's a voice, quieter but wiser, rising in the background. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. This phrase is not a retreat. It's not avoidance. It's not giving up. It's self-preservation. It's emotional intelligence. It's the recognition that continuing certain conversations isn't a sign of strength. It's a fast track to burnout. And we've all been there, trapped in loops that go nowhere, arguing in circles with someone who isn't listening, only waiting to respond, repeating ourselves, getting louder, losing our composure, and walking away with less peace than we started with. And afterward, we wonder, why did I stay in that? Why didn't I walk away when I knew it was over? Most people are taught that walking away is weakness, that silence is surrender. But the truth is, knowing when to end a conversation is an advanced form of discipline, because anyone can keep talking, anyone can stay in a toxic loop. What takes strength is the ability to say, "This is no longer good for either of us. I'm done, for now, maybe forever." That is not passive. That is powerful. It's not about having the last word. In fact, this phrase often means giving it up. You let go of the need to be understood in the moment. You release the expectation that this person will suddenly meet you with empathy or fairness. And that release is where your peace begins. It's where you reclaim your time, your energy, and your mental clarity. There are conversations that drain you, not because of what's being said, but because of how it's being said. The tone is sharp, the energy is heavy, the intentions are unclear, and despite all your efforts to stay calm, rational, and open, you can feel yourself slipping. That's the moment. That's the cue. When your inner world begins to twist into knots, that's when this phrase becomes your compass. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. It's not said with sarcasm, not with aggression. It's said with stillness, with finality. It's a way of saying, my peace is worth more than this moment, and it doesn't need to be dramatic. No long explanations, no guilt-tripping, just the clear acknowledgement that the exchange is no longer productive or respectful, and therefore it ends here. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And the longer you try to force communication with someone who isn't ready, emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually, the more the chaos grows. You may think you're making progress, that you're being patient, but if the tone, the intention, or the emotional safety of the conversation is compromised, you're not building understanding, you're feeding tension. And tension always leaves a residue. This isn't just about personal relationships, it's about every arena of your life. At work, where passive-aggressive power plays masquerade as feedback in families, where certain topics always end in silence or shouting. Even within friendships, where years of closeness can't compensate for the fact that mutual respect is no longer present. You feel it, you know it, and still, the urge to explain, to clarify, to just fix it one more time creeps in. But every time you stay too long in a harmful dialogue, you teach yourself that your boundaries are negotiable, that your peace is optional, that your time is less important than their approval. And that message, repeated often enough, becomes part of how you see yourself. It conditions you to absorb, to endure, to minimize discomfort until it swallows you whole. I'd prefer not to continue this conversation is a way of rewriting that message. It says, I am not a dumping ground for projections. I am not a target for misplaced anger. I am not responsible for carrying both sides of this emotional labor. And if the other person doesn't understand that boundary, that's their journey, not your burden. You may worry that it's cold, that it sounds dismissive, that it might hurt their feelings. But there's a difference between being kind and being permissive. Kindness doesn't mean allowing someone to tear you apart emotionally just because they had a bad day. It doesn't mean absorbing verbal chaos in the name of keeping the peace. Peace that comes at the cost of your well-being isn't peace. It's submission. And submission isn't love. It isn't respect. It isn't maturity. Seneca once said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." And many of us are doing just that, suffering in conversations that should have ended 10 minutes ago, 10 months ago, 10 years ago, out of habit, out of guilt, out of fear of being misunderstood. But no one ever found clarity by drowning in chaos. No one ever built peace by constantly explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. This phrase isn't a door slammed shut. It's a hand gently raised, a pause, a full stop in a world that pressures you to always have something to say. And in that pause, something powerful happens. You create space. Space for clarity, space for breath, space for dignity to return. Not all conversations deserve closure in the way we imagine it. Some people won't give you a satisfying ending. They won't apologize. They won't suddenly get it. They'll continue spinning their stories, rewriting the narrative to suit their ego. And that's okay. You don't need their version to match yours. You only need to decide when the conversation has taken more than it's given and step out of it with your self-respect intact. When someone pushes back on your boundary, saying, "You're just running away," you remind yourself, stepping away from disrespect isn't running. It's walking towards self-respect. When they say, "So we're just not going to talk about it," you say, "Not like this." Because that's what this phrase is, a filter. It separates what deserves your attention from what doesn't. It reminds others that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. And sometimes it'll be the people closest to you who resist this the most, because they're used to the old version of you, the one who stayed too long, explained too much, tolerated too often. This new version, the one who calmly says, "I'd prefer not to continue this conversation," disrupts the dynamic. It calls people to rise or retreat, and either outcome is revealing. Marcus Aurelius once reflected, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This phrase embodies that completely. It's not about punishing someone for being disrespectful. It's about refusing to become like them in your response. You don't fight fire with fire. You walk away from the flames before they consume your peace. You'll be surprised how powerful silence becomes after a clear boundary. Some people will try to fill it. They'll circle back. They'll poke at you to re-engage. But if you hold your ground, something shifts. They either come back with a new tone or they disappear. And either way, the air becomes clearer, the weight lifts, and you're left with space to think, to breathe, to feel human again. This isn't about being superior. It's about being healthy, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Because the more you practice ending conversations that no longer serve you, the more you develop an unshakable trust in yourself. You stop needing others to validate your boundaries. You stop feeling guilty for choosing peace. You start realizing that not everything requires your energy, that some storms pass faster when you stop standing in the rain. Aristotle taught that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And knowing when you've reached your limit, when the energy has turned, when the words have lost meaning, when your calm is no longer safe, is part of that wisdom. You don't need to always have the right response. You don't need to always be available for more conversation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "I'm done." And not done in anger, done in clarity, in grace, in conviction. You end the conversation not to hurt, but to heal, not to punish, but to protect. And the protection is not just for you, it's for the relationship too. Because sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is walk away until both people can return with softness, not swords. 5. That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. There's a quiet kind of courage in disagreeing without creating conflict, in hearing someone out fully, even when every part of you is ready to interrupt, in standing firm in your truth, not because you want to win, but because you know who you are. And in a world where people argue like it's a sport, where differing views are treated like personal attacks, that kind of grounded self-possession is rare. That's what makes the phrase, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it," so powerful. It doesn't seek to dominate or dismiss. It doesn't provoke. It simply affirms, "You've been heard, and I choose my own path." Most people don't know how to handle disagreement without escalation. For them, hearing "I see it differently" feels like betrayal, a threat, an insult to their identity. And so they push. They try to convince, persuade, convert. They raise their voice, repeat their arguments, throw facts like punches, hoping something will finally make you submit. And that's when the conversation stops being about truth. It becomes about control, not discussion, but domination, not curiosity, but ego. When you say, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it," you step out of that game. You don't meet pressure with pressure. You meet it with presence, with poise, and with boundaries. You're saying, without needing a debate, that your mind is your own. And more importantly, that the other person doesn't need to agree with you for you to feel valid. That is emotional independence at its core. Now, this might not sound like a revolutionary sentence, but it is. Because so many people have built their self-worth around agreement, around being accepted, liked, validated. And when that agreement isn't given, they crumble. They think being challenged means being rejected. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the most respectful thing you can offer someone is your honesty, your real thoughts, your real stance. And if that honesty is wrapped in respect, it becomes a bridge, not a wall. But here's where it gets tricky. This phrase, as simple as it is, must come from the right place. It's not to be used with smugness or superiority, not to shut someone down or make them feel small. It must come from calm, from maturity, from a genuine desire to hold space for difference without turning it into a war. You say it to maintain connection, not to sever it. And that tone, that intention, is what determines whether it builds respect or breaks it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are means learning to carry your opinions without apology, without aggression, without shrinking when they're questioned. Not everyone will agree with how you see the world, and they shouldn't. Diversity of thought is not the enemy of unity. It's the foundation of real understanding. But that understanding only happens when both people feel safe to speak and safe to differ. We've all had moments when someone tries to tell us what to think. It might come from love, from fear, or from habit, but the pattern is the same. They insist, they push, they tell you what's best for you. And sometimes it's subtle, a raised eyebrow, a condescending tone, a sarcastic laugh. Other times, it's blunt. "You're wrong. That's ridiculous. You'll see I was right one day." And in those moments, your instinct might be to argue, to lay out your logic, to go point for point and prove your side. But what if you didn't? What if you just breathed, looked them in the eye, and said, "That's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it"? That response doesn't fuel the fire. It absorbs the heat and turns it into stillness. It doesn't challenge their identity. It honors their right to see things their way while honoring your right to do the same. And that balance, that delicate refusal to engage in emotional tug-of-war, is what keeps you grounded. You see, this sentence is not just a verbal boundary. It's a psychological shield. It keeps your inner world intact when the outer world tries to reshape it. And over time, it teaches you something vital. You don't need to convince others to feel secure in your beliefs. You don't need universal agreement to feel intelligent, capable, or right. That need to persuade, while often dressed up as conversation, is sometimes just fear wearing a mask. Fear that you're only as solid as the support around you. But when you reach the point where you can say, "I respect your view, but I don't share it," and mean it, you've moved past that fear. You've entered a new level of self-trust, a kind of trust that doesn't shake every time it's questioned, a kind that stays firm without being defensive, and that in turn invites others to meet you at the same level, because maturity recognizes maturity. Strength respects strength. There's another reason this phrase is so useful. Not all disagreements happen with enemies. In fact, The hardest ones usually happen with people we love, family, friends, mentors, people who've helped shape us. And when they hold strong views that clash with our own, it can be incredibly difficult to stand firm without fracturing the relationship. That's when this line becomes a bridge. You're not shutting them out. You're saying, I hear you, and I value your right to believe what you believe, but I'm not you, and that's okay. Epictetus wrote, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That applies here in full. When we're triggered by someone else's opinion, it's often because we haven't fully made peace with our own. We're still searching for outside permission, and so we react, not to them, but to our own internal uncertainty. But the moment you no longer feel the need to react, that's the moment you know you've grown. This phrase becomes effortless, not a defense, not a strategy, just a reflection of your clarity. And clarity, when spoken softly, can carry more impact than 100 loud arguments. Because people expect resistance, they're braced for it. But when you meet intensity with ease, it disarms them. They may not agree with you, but they'll feel the integrity in your words, and even if they never admit it, part of them will respect you for it. Seneca once said, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. And one of the hardest things to learn is how to stay kind when you're being pressured, how to keep your dignity when others question your path, how to allow others to be wrong without needing to punish them. That's what this phrase teaches us. Disagreement doesn't have to mean disconnection. You can love someone deeply and still say, I don't think the way you do. And you don't have to say it with hostility or distance, just certainty, just calm. Over time, people begin to associate your presence with something rare, emotional safety. They know you won't explode when challenged, that you won't mock them for thinking differently, that even in disagreement, you stay grounded. And that kind of presence is magnetic. It draws people in. It invites truth. It builds trust. You don't need to speak louder to be heard. You don't need to win every argument to prove your worth. The real victory is walking away with your peace intact, your values unshaken, and your dignity untouched. That is strength, that is mastery, and that is the kind of presence the world remembers in silence, not noise. If this spoke to you, there's another video on your screen right now that will take you deeper. Watch it next. You're ready for it. And thank you for being here, for being a part of Stoic Journal.